Okay. So, covered first impressions, I think, really well in a lot of different directions, a lot of different perspectives. Exactly what I think we were hoping, the five of us, when we have a panel with this kind of depth, experience, and diversity as well of experience. Let's dig a little bit deeper and examine some of the key issues highlighted over the course of the speech. We'll touch on three or four of them. I want to start with property taxes, which was likely a smart topic to lead with. One could say the elephant in the room because this term of council raised taxes to a record level, at least in this century, 24 or 25% increase over the course of their term of their multi-year budget. To boil that down to its simplest form for folks listening, that means if you were paying $4,000 in 2023 in your property taxes annually, you'll be paying just a touch under $5,000 today. So again, a significant increase. I wonder if we could start there. And Paul, why don't we go right back to you?
Yeah, good for for the mayor taking on that elephant in the room. And he will say it was high and now we're bringing it down, right? You always start because the electorate's memory is short. So
Didn't you
it's
just tell us something about a book where you can
yeah,
tell fibs with numbers?
yeah, exactly. So I understand what he's doing, but at the end of the day, people are struggling to put food on their table. People are struggling with increases of utilities costs. People are struggling, and then they're struggling to pay municipal taxes, and so um, he was smart to address it up front early, get it out of the way, and move forward. But it's been a tough issue for them.
Yeah, fair enough. Good place to leave it, I think, Paul. Moshe, how about you?
So, ironically, we heard that there was booing last time the topic of property taxes. So I think that the mayor, took a bold stance in bringing that up at first point once again. He makes a disciplined case. Reducing projected increases from mid-teens to potentially the low threes is not insignificant. So let's name that, especially in the current economic climate. Debt avoidance and long-term financial planning are real accomplishments. And voters who care about that sort of fiscal responsibility will hear that clearly. Where the framing falls short is that property tax is treated almost entirely, and the mayor is not alone, and this council is not alone in doing this, as a technical problem, a math problem to be managed rather than a social one. Property taxes don't land evenly. We know in this room and on this panel that it doesn't land evenly. Renters pay them indirectly. Seniors on fixed incomes absorb them with very little flexibility and endure them. And lower income homeowners feel them for far more acutely than higher income households. That equity lens is largely missing from this speech, and it didn't ask who is being squeezed or how repeated increases interact with rising housing costs and stagnant wages. It doesn't connect those dots, and it also stops short of naming the deeper issue that property tax is probably one of the least progressive tools we rely on to fund essential services. Politically, this is safe framing. It reassures taxpayers and avoids controversy. But from a justice and community care perspective, it leaves unanswered questions about whether we're willing to push forward for fair municipal revenue tools rather than continue to balance the system on the backs of those with the least room to absorb it.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for that. Steve, how about you? What are your thoughts?
I think when people reflect on the term, they would look 4 years ago and say, okay, so property taxes have gone up 24% since that time. And yet I think that time there'd be an impression that the city was overall in better shape. So whether that's real or not, but that's the feeling that's out there. And I think he needs to and needed to address the feeling. And I think he needed to address that the issue that it's not just London, It's a provincial framework. Communities across the province struggle with it. It's not just because London Council deferred infrastructure investments before his term as mayor. There may be an issue to that, and probably Paul and Matt know more about that than I do. But the issue really is where am I going with property taxes as a taxpayer locally? Don't just justify it. That's a re-elect me platform for sure, because they're down, they're better, and so on. And then the math and the story he's telling on the LPS and so on. All that's fine. That's all about re-election. But convince me that it's going to be okay. Convince me that these taxes were well spent. Convince me that that I'm not going to be struggling with that over the next term if I re-elect largely the same council again. Are we going to be looking at another 25%, 24% in the next year, next council, or is this just a one-off experience and now we're in stably at 3 to 4 to less than 3%? He said he might come in at. So I think the context matters, and I think that it was a safe story to make today or on his speech, and I think he did a good job on that. But I think there's an untold story about the context around all of this that would have been really, I think, good for our community to have heard.
Yeah, great. I think you make some really good points, and you only get to blame the last council once in a
Right.
situation like this. So it'd be very interesting to see what happens as we move forward into the next term of council and what that makeup of that council might be. This was promised to us to be a one-time readjustment because previous councils had underspent, had artificially kept the taxes low.
Mm.
It's a soundbite, but I think that there are a lot of members of this current council that were members of previous councils, including the current mayor, to be fair. So I don't think that this should have been a surprise if budget numbers were being kept artificially low, because he was at the decision-making table, and so were a number of other councillors from past term that transferred over to this term. Carol, how about you?
Matt, just before you move on, and Carol,
Yeah.
just to jump in, don't forget he's got strong mayor powers now, and he owned this budget for the last 4 years. He pushed it through. So that's a difference over the previous thing where it was the council as a whole. He has new power.
Actually, that's a good point. I think we'll talk about strong mayor powers. It'll probably come up a couple of times during our discussion. Thanks, Paul. Carol, over to you.
Yeah, so I mean, there's a lot to build on here, and actually, Mojdeh and I have talked about the property taxes on other political panels before. So building on these issues, one of the things I do want to talk about is what Mojdeh just said about the equity aspect of it, because I have talked to a lot of seniors, particularly a year ago when there was the provincial election. Even though, it's a municipal issue, there's still that crossover where people are going to bring that issue up anyways, because it affects their everyday life. And so there are these seniors that are struggling with paying their property taxes and then also trying to get food. And so we already know that there are these issues of affordability, that more people are visiting the food bank, and particularly seniors are suffering. So then it's exactly to what Steve is saying. If you are getting to a point where you are squeezed to pay your property taxes, you want to be able to feel that the city is moving in a positive direction and that there is some tangible improvements to what is going on in the city. And that is exactly what he should have been highlighting. I mean, he does talk about the successes, but I think it needed to be done in a more personal way. I felt like it was so much more based in infrastructure and less on people and the impact on people's lives and how it's improving their day to day. Like, we are investing in this. It was just too business oriented for me. And so as much as we need to increase property taxes, it needs to happen because the demands are so much more on the community. There are infrastructure projects that have to be taken care of. And we know that, like, the federal and particularly the provincial government are not stepping in enough to help with a lot of the requirements and the needs the cities have. Then, we have an issue where the property taxes have to increase. They increase them, but show us that you're spending the money correctly, and don't just make it an election issue where you say, okay, it was here, but now I've dropped it to here. And I'm sure, as you said, he was keeping in mind the groan / boo that happened a few years back, because people are going to remember this when they get to their, voting time, and they'll think, okay, I have really struggled to pay these taxes and I don't think my city has improved. Does this person deserve to be reelected? Especially if they're using strong mayor powers to own the budget.
Yeah, and I think really what you're talking about is the value proposition. It's important to invest in our community. It's important to invest in ourselves. And what are the community benefits that come out of that? And how do we treat all populations across our community in a fair and equal way? And is there value for money? I think is a number of you have raised that point.